Hello and welcome to the Business Insights Manufacturing and Engineering Forum. We're here discussing international manufacturing and engineering with a group of panellists and experts in the field. This discussion could go anywhere. We've got a loose structure around, but it's going to be an informal discussion, and we'll be talking about all the current things that are affecting manufacturing and engineering on a global scale. Okay, so I'm Zoe Darlington. I have a business called Pure Improvement, and I help manufacturing and engineering businesses become leaner and greener. And yeah, I'll introduce you to my panelists. They can introduce themselves. Okay, just letting in Alex. Okay, so Tom, do you want to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Good morning. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Zoe. And so my name is Tom Askew. I'm the CEO of Panel Right, and we are experts in the cost-reducing bare printed circuit boards.
Excellent. Okay, John, you go.
Hi, my name's John. I'm a director at Capstan Green Energy. We manufacture low carbon thermal and electrical power generation equipment.
Okay, Paul. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Paul Taylor from Scanner. We're a UK company that specialises in the manufacture of portable X-ray systems and mail screening systems used in the security market. Thank you for the invitation, Zoe.
No problem. Okay, Ian.
Afternoon all, my name is Ian Woodley from Stilo Touch. We help science, technology, manufacturing and medtech businesses showcase their expertise through innovative, interactive digital presentations. So instead of that very kind of linear slide decks or boring PDFs, we have a really highly engaging, interactive offline platform helping advanced manufacturers to really sort of showcase their expertise, bring up specifications, talk about their technology. Thank you.
Alex.
Hello everyone, my name is Alex Miller. I'm an architect with Ridge & Partners, and we specialise in the multidiscipline design of manufacturing facilities and commercial projects.
Excellent. Gaurav.
Hi, I am Gaurav. I am a manufacturing professional with interest in engineering, manufacturing processes and quality assurance.
Excellent. Okay, so that's the panelist, that's the guest. Funnily enough, I've just not long since got off the back of hosting the Climate Change Forum, and one of the things that we discussed at that forum leads on to this forum, I believe, and we talked about how one of the threats is going to be to the supply chain. And I think just off from climate change and off the back of a pandemic, I think we've really all felt the hard effects of that. So I'll start off with a question on supply chain and how has the pandemic affected supply chain, and what does global manufacturing businesses need to do to improve the current situation with the supply chain? Okay, I'll go around the guests to start with, and then you can just all start talking amongst yourselves. So Tom.
Okay, so yes, so the pandemic is been quite impactful, I think, globally on business in general. Most of the people that I'm dealing with still aren't back in the office, and so everyone's trying to work out how to get this work done remotely. I will tell you, it is also a tough time to start a new business because everybody else's focus is on just staying safe at the moment. But I will say, as far as recovery goes, the work that we're offering our clients will only increase the available capacity of what is in the system for, in this case, bare board manufacturing, because the 25% that we're looking at reducing is actually, that gives a cushion to the bare board houses that are making that, pulling together that raw material for industry. So it gives them a cushion of not having to build new plants as fast as they would be.
So looking at reducing the waste, the unnecessary materials, that could be one of the answers, and that's a subject that's very close to my heart. So yeah, John, what's your thoughts on that?
It's impacted the Capstan business supply chain terribly. Printed circuit boards, components. It's highlighted a kind of almost helpless dependence on China in many of the electrical and electronic supply chains, where everything seems to come from China. So Capstan is kind of scratching its head and thinking, actually, cheap is wonderful, but actually when you can't buy any, that's not good. So we're looking at perhaps more domestic US or North America based suppliers for supply chain security. And literally one of the big problems even with native manufacturing is that things are just not being made. Plants have been shut down. In the US, places have been kept open, but if they've had a COVID break, they've had to shut down, and then of course, which delays backlogs. And sometimes now we're looking, if we're a part that would have typically been available almost next day, we're now looking at lead times of up to 90 days, sometimes more, simply because places were shut down and there's been no production. So it's had a big impact on our supply chain. It's not yet impacted our capacity to manufacture, but if it had gone on much longer, it would have, simply because we'd have just run out of everything we needed. So yeah, pandemic's had a big impact. We also see the kind of America First message that we started under President Trump and has moved through onto President Biden. As people, the US people are starting to think, hang on a minute, we need a market here in this country. We need people to sell to. And so there's a kind of, that's having an impact and too in terms of thinking, yeah, how do we manage our supply chain to deliver?
Excellent. Paul, what's your take on how's the pandemic affected your supply chain? Has it impacted your supply chain?
Well, actually, it hasn't affected us as much as perhaps it could have done. I think we, as a company, were mindful of a supply chain with the thing called Brexit looming. And so we had been looking at our supply chain sort of early part of 2020, end of 2019. And what that did make us do is to start, buying in sort of key components that were going to be necessary, in anticipation of hiccups around the Brexit time. So what that allowed us to do is kind of ride the storm a little bit, in terms of we were always been able to deliver throughout the pandemic. We've always been able to supply, I think more often than not, on time to our customers. As far as leaving the factory, where things were delayed to our international customers was the freight, delivering, shipping goods around became a real challenge, because many destinations where we were flying, the airlines were flying, 10 times a day, maybe came once a week even in some cases. So the delivery from the UK to international customers was a challenge, but we still managed to manufacture the goods in time. What we are seeing though now is that we are seeing a shortage of some key components. I think combination of the pandemic and also Brexit, and it's going to take a while, I think possibly to the end of the year before we get back into to normal. So I think on the whole we managed to weather the storm. I think we're not out of the storm yet. There's still issues that we have to address, but I think generally we've come through it okay.
It's interesting though, because in manufacturing, I mean, how we are doing things, how we thought were the right things the right way and the most efficient way to do things has now kind of been thrown like up in the air and out the window. So you talked about preparing in Brexit. I mean, in manufacturing, we've always, from a lean point of view, are working towards keeping low inventory and stock levels and working at just in time, you know, and with Brexit and the pandemic, it all seems to have gone back to the days of kind of hoarding and sort of getting in materials and parts just in case, because, you know, because that supply chain is quite unstable, isn't it? But it's yeah, a lot of the things that we've worked so hard for in the past has kind of been just thrown out of the window at the moment. But that's the way the world is. It's just we don't have the predictability at the moment, do we?
No.
No. Ian, how about you? What's your take on this? Have you seen your clients? Have they been affected with the supply from the supply chain point of view?
Yeah, it's an interesting one actually, because you know we work quite a lot within the advanced manufacturing sector, technology businesses, and so on. So obviously, you know, we've had very little impact ourselves personally, but certainly for some of the clients we work with, two in particular who are advanced manufacturers of fairly technical pieces of equipment, they did experience the probably the more obvious challenges with regards to shipping and supply delays from China, for example. So, you know, that's something that I'm sure, you know, a lot of people have experienced. But actually, they held up pretty well with it. And even, I think, at the height of the pandemic last year, their production in Worcestershire was probably at 80-85% of where it would normally be anyway. So it didn't impact them that much, actually. They seemed to manage it very well. I think they were probably sort of increasing their stocks in good time to ensure that their manufacturing was maintained. They are Swiss-German owned as a parent. The UK business is very robust, has about 85% market share in the UK. But what they found was they were actually taking manufacturing from Germany and handling that in the UK, just because it smoothed out that whole manufacturing process as well, you see. So that was kind of from a inter-business political relationship side of things, that was quite a coup for them to be able to say, look, we'll handle this. If you can't do it on the continent, we'll do it for you, kind of thing. So that was an interesting one. But certainly in my experience with the clients that we work with, they haven't had too many problems with it, really, because they've had the foresight to get their stock in, and they've maintained good levels of manufacturing throughout, actually, to be honest.
Has Brexit, a benefit of Brexit is it that it prepared us, give us that little cushion for going forward?
Quite possibly.
Maybe. Alex, what's your take on this? In your industry, has supply chains been affected, I guess?
Yeah, absolutely. We work with the construction industry supply chain, and that we're seeing big kind of pent-up demand in terms of the projects not going ahead during the pandemic, and now they're all coming to site, and people are keen to make their projects go ahead. There's now suddenly a pent-up demand in the supply chain, and that's impacting the price, which also impacts whether you can go ahead with the project, because obviously if the price goes up, your product value and costs go up as well. So yeah, there's certainly some challenges in terms of trying to smooth that peak and the demand across the construction industry at the moment. There's also a kind of shift from retail, I suppose, for going online. So there's more and more commercial logistics and, like you said, Zoe, kind of stockpiling requirements and requirement for warehouse space. So that's an area that's certainly increasing in terms of who's wanting to develop sites as well. So yeah, there's a number of impacts across supply chain and sites becoming available, and yeah, we'll see the kind of fallout of that over the next year or so, because it's not something that changes overnight. So it's work to be done.
That's an interesting one, because most businesses I work tend to be quite constrained from a space point of view, and I guess now with the pandemic and preparing for an unstable supply chain, you know, is that one of the pressures is space and finding more storage space and warehouse space, and How do we get around that?
Well, yeah, no, it's an interesting point because there's great advances in technology that we can draw upon as well, like automation and advanced automated storage and retrieval, so we can cram more into smaller spaces. But it's and deal with things faster with a smoother flow of materials going in and out, so you don't have to have such a big buffer store. But yeah, there's those challenges we've got to work through with clients and customers as well as and supply chain partners.
Do they use lean in the manufacturing, in the construction industry? Is that a common concept?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you don't want to double handle materials. You want to get something to site just in time production. So that's definitely something that helps with a smooth construction process.
Yeah, excellent. Gaurav, do you want to join in there? What are you seeing? How are you experiencing problems in your supply chain?
There have been a few supply chain issues, at least with the passive components over the last couple of years anyway. And since the pandemic, what we find is even the standard components, off-the-shelf components that you'd expect to see the following day haven't turned up even 2-3 weeks after they have been ordered. So there is a massive shortage of electronic components in the market. So we have had to change the way we look into our supply chain. We are now stocking a lot, as in we have a lot of buffer stock, and even simple things like packaging it's difficult to come by. So we have gone into reviewing the top 100 concerns, and then we've stockpiled them and gone back to the good old days, as you said, of not just in time, but I think that's just the nature of how it is at the moment. But even simple things like metals or things like solder, they are also the prices have gone up. So effectively, we haven't put our prices up, but I'm sure that might happen with due course. So the component shortages plus the unpredictable customer behavior, because we are getting spikes in orders after a long spell of no activity. So it's affecting us a lot. It's getting difficult to plan the supply chain activities with the component shortages and a general imbalance in the market at the moment.
Yeah, definitely. It's been very unstable. What are the other impacts? What do we think are the other impacts to engineering and manufacturing that the pandemic has brought us? So I'll pick on someone. John, so do you want to go, John?
I think what the pandemic did, it was interesting to hear what Alex said in terms of online retail. It was quite clear that Jeff Bezos with Amazon was after the value in the retail real estate market. He wanted that for himself, which in looking at the value of his company, he seems to be suggesting that he's got. So I think one of the things it's probably accelerated that what was happening already in consumer retail. People have got used to waiting day, 2-3 days, searching online, getting things, and having a choice that's so vast that you can't match it in a store unless you're doing something very special. So I think that's going to be a big change that may well stick. But as Alex has said as well, what the enabler is data and automation. Amazon takes just in time and puts it on steroids, because the way their warehouses work and how they understand what people are looking at, what people are buying, what they buy when they look at other things, all that kind of information. So if there's one lesson, I think, from many B2C businesses is the value of data, and is bricks and mortar the right retail environment for them? Should they be in a virtual world with their own warehouse, for example, just a warehouse, or should they be in bricks and mortar retail, or a mixture of both? Where can they leverage the best value for their goods and services? So yeah, I think that's one of the big things I would say. Business to business, it's more difficult to say. What we do is low volume, we're not high volume, so it's different. But I still think we're going down the path of using more platform technology for selling, so email, PR and advertising, using focus messaging, using databases of people, focusing messaging for those people to find out, to get an engagement going, to find out what they're interested in, rather than the kind of traditional old-fashioned cold calling and things like that. So I think probably, again, pushed more online, again, more online tools.
Yeah, more online. Everything's moving online, isn't it? So I clocked up hours and hours. I think over 7 days, I clocked up 50 hours of Zoom time. That's quite unusual. That was leading up to these events, but I was kind of quite blown away by it when I thought about it, because pre-pandemic that never would have happened. I would have been trying to get hold of people, trying to phone them, but now everybody's so used to Zoom that in a way it's kind of connected us so much easier, because you can just ping an email over to someone and say, can you have a quick Zoom with me, and it happens, whereas like that never happened before. So this online experience of communication, I mean, you know, there's been lots of discussion about whether the online communication is as effective as in person, but certainly when we're crossing borders and we're working internationally, which, you know, to be honest with you, a lot of international companies work that way anyway, but I think we're just finding this way where we can sort of be very quick at, you know, from a communication point of view. The online world has really helped us, I believe.
Yeah, I think also that in the big corporates, I think managers would have seen their travel budgets disappear and the money be sitting in their account.
Yeah.
And I think there'll probably be a reluctance to give that back.
Yeah.
I know certainly for us, salespeople, we're encouraged to travel a lot less, and only when it really is impactful.
Yeah.
And internally, people are saying, well, you don't really need to travel. You're an internal person. What you're traveling for? So we're seeing in our business, there's a lot more scrutiny over travel, simply because travel budgets have not been touched for nearly 18 months.
Yeah.
And then, of course, that's all of a sudden there's a very, very big number that, as people have said, actually, how worthwhile, what's the return on this travel effectively? So from manufacturers, if you're in rail, aviation, the pandemic has probably hit you very hard. Rolls-Royce shuttered both its engine plants because no one is buying airplanes, and no one really knows if investors will want to immediately place orders with the uncertainty around the cost of air travel will go up, because it looks like they will have to buy carbon credits and not be gifted them as was before. So I think pandemic plus climate crisis is going to be hugely problematic for the travel industry, because there is real uncertainty in terms of the cost of travel. So trains and buses have to pay VAT on fuel, full taxes on fuel, airlines don't. I read the British government is pushing for that to be changed, so they have to pay VAT. Plus then on top of that, if they've got to pay carbon, I mean, probably tripling in the price of an airline ticket wouldn't be an unheard of thing. So
not necessarily a bad thing in the, you know.
So I think the kind of virtual presence, like we're talking about Zoom and things, is going to become the norm. I think particularly for internal people in companies, salespeople will still travel, but like me, they will be under scrutiny as to why are you going, what's the purpose, what benefit is there to the customer of this?
Yeah.
And it will be much more rigorously controlled.
The return on investment, that's what's needed, isn't it, ultimately? I
Yeah.
used to work for a very large corporation, and they would have a central operational excellence team whose whole job it was to drive out waste within that organisation, and all they did was fly around the world, you know, and it just used to
Generating waste.
yeah, it was like, yeah, and they wasn't, you know, one could be based in Germany and you'd be sent over to the US. It wasn't when they would have somebody in the US that probably could have just as easily done the same role. There was no planning involved at all. I used to really wonder what that was about. Alex, what do you think in terms of the effects of the global pandemic or their effects it's had on your industry?
I think with every challenge there's an opportunity as well, isn't there? So in terms of working remotely, it helps us reduce those travel expenses. It means that we can present more effectively using screen shares, but it prevents us from all getting around the room and doing some of the workshops sometimes as well. So there's still a need to meet up in person and go into the office, or you know, that isn't going to take away the people on the shop floor actually working within the manufacturing arena itself. So although there will, as John mentioned, and there'll be a shift towards kind of data-driven design, data-driven manufacturing as well. So more of those roles can be done remotely, but you still need the health and safety, you still need everyone contributing to the manufacturing process. So there will be more roles that are kind of upskilling, more remote roles. But yeah, I think the Brexit impact is also something that we probably haven't felt the full extent of yet, because there are new tariffs coming in to affect that effectively mean any bulky large items or different types of goods are taxed and tariffed in different ways. So there's going to be a constraint for some businesses that they suddenly have to start working within, or there'll be an opportunity for other businesses that can then find out the best way to negotiate those issues. So there's always an opportunity with every challenge and constraint.
Yeah, exactly. Gaurav, what impacts have you seen from the current climate? And I suppose, I'm talking pandemic, but Brexit as well. So we're in quite unprecedented times at the moment in the UK. Although this is a global forum, so we won't stick too tightly onto Brexit. But
so some of our customer base is at least half of it is in Europe. So we've seen that before that the Brexit deadline, we had a surge in the orders. The order book was 150% to normal start times. So we struggled to put those orders through, and then it happened. It just happened. Imminent it was, and since then we've seen that it's been difficult with regards to keeping up the deadlines because of the logistical nightmare, because it's taking longer for the goods to arrive at the destination in Europe, and also now you have to make sure that there's a correct paperwork to go with it. So you have to make sure that the tariff codes are correct, and we've all had this training on how to find the right tariff code for the goods, how to communicate with the customers. And now that we have to move away from the CE mark, we need to ensure that our paperwork is reflected. So then we now need to look into the product certification, and also look into having two standards, one UK equivalent of CE going forward. So we need to investigate into that. So it's quite a few interesting challenges that Brexit brought. But with regards to the pandemic and the supply chain in general, what's also happened is because of the component shortages, and because we share much of the components with the mobile companies who have a lot bigger budget and buying power, we are left with literally nothing in the market. So we've had to redesign quite a few of our products. We've had to look into our legacy products, and some things that were obsolete, we have to bring it back to life because we can't service our customer needs. So there is a lot more of re-engineering going on because of this current situation. And it's not getting any easier because there is a severe component shortage. So something that was designed 2 years back, again, we can't get the components. It's on 52-week lead time. So we're constantly having to come up with new ways of making sure our customer gets their goods on time. Yeah. So it's quite a challenging time. But again, as Alex said,
are you learning things for the future though? I mean, you're saying you're constantly having to come up with new ways of doing things. Are these good ways of doing things, or are these like sticky plasters? Are these things that are going to keep you stronger for the future, or is it just like this? Well, you're just getting through a crisis at the moment. How does it feel?
So when we are redesigning a legacy product, we are looking at what new features the customer would want. So we'll talk to the customer, get their feedback and say, okay, that's a legacy product. We can't give them that. So let's add this new feature. So we're looking at redesigning something rather than just redesigning that part of that legacy product to make sure that it works. So yes, we are adding new features. So it is looking into the future, but it's not the
Oh, Gaurav, as he froze there for everybody, he has, isn't it? Oh, Gaurav, you froze. So we're going to move on to Paul Taylor. So he's probably still talking. I realize it. Yeah. Hi. Oh, you froze there, Gaurav. We missed a bit of that. So.
Sorry. So we were looking at a short-term 3-year cycle instead of a 10-year cycle that we would look in generally, which means that we take a product, add a new feature, and it is better than what it was, but it's not what would be applicable in 10 years' time. So we will have to go back to a long-term.
Okay, he's frozen there. Okay, go on, Paul. You go.
Okay, well, we export a lot, and international travel prior to the pandemic was a key part of our sales and marketing function. Clearly, the travel came to a grinding halt last March and hasn't really restarted since then. And so what we had to do is we had to think, well, how can we engage with our customers? So we've put a lot of emphasis on things like online webinars, online presentations, and these proved to be very, very successful. In the past, you may meet customers at a conference hall or an exhibition area, and it depends on the time of day. They could be distracted. They might see a friend from a long way back, and then you've lost your opportunity. Whereas sitting looking at a computer screen for an hour or two, you had a real good, effective, meaningful conversations with them. We also do online product demonstrations, and I think that is certainly the way forward. Will it stop travel completely? No, I don't think it will. I think there's always a requirement to meet people face to face, to shake hands, to demonstrate your products in person. And also, a lot of our customers are government customers. They don't like or don't have the ability to go online to watch things like webinars and things like that. So we always have to accept that not everyone can operate in the same way that we operate. In addition to that, we also have equipment that's out there that historically would have been maintained and serviced by our engineers, and the lack of inability to travel meant that we had to do things differently. So we've identified local companies who we then trained up and then got them to do the work on our behalf. So yes, a lot of things have changed over the last year, a lot for the good. I think communication is a lot better now. I think now, as you say, we have plenty of time for Zoom calls, team meetings, where in the past, it may be get the diary out and when's everyone available next. Now it becomes part and parcel of our sort of working day that you communicate with others. So that's worked well as well. So yeah, it has changed, but I think in a lot of cases it's for the better. If you think how much waste we spent on airlines, at airports, jet lags in hotels, that's something which hopefully we can avoid in the future, and be better at it as well in what we do.
Excellent. Yeah. Tom, over to you. So what's the effects, the effects and the impacts that the global pandemic has had on your business?
So I think pretty dramatic, just from the sense that the whole industry is sort of taking a pause, trying to figure out how they're going to work. And from my point, picking on carrying on with Paul, communication is key for us, and education is another component of that. So forums like this are perfect for getting the word out as to what we do. We find it's interesting in this particular market with printed circuit boards, the different ways that companies interact with and design their printed circuit boards, and with tools like LinkedIn, where we're trying to find people that we can talk to explain what we're all about. It's a particular challenge, and it's more than hit or miss. There isn't in a lot of places just a central person that would be able to direct all this. Even if they're looking for something new, this, one of the advantages of the pandemic and people now working from home is if they've been in that position for such a time, it's less of an issue where they can bring that work home and just do it from there. But then they're isolated, and there's no more talk around the water cooler of hey, there's this new thing out here that we should give a shot to, give a try, and see if we can make this work. That's the hurdle that we see globally, just trying to break into to talk to the right people.
Yeah, just to add to that, I mean, it's the training and the culture in the teams that's going to be the problem with working remotely, or only being in the office or the facility a few days a week, because you miss out on that, being able to bring juniors up, and juniors bring a lot of kind of new ideas and energy into the business, but they need the experience side by side to guide that in the right direction. And what we found, we work with, I've appointed 2 juniors since in the last year, and we are working remotely, but you have to do a lot more. You have to be really in close contact with them in order to train them and give them the right guidance. And some of that stuff they'd just pick up through osmosis, being in the office, and presumably that happens across all businesses. But there's also the culture and the kind of enjoyment of going to work and having that separation from your home life balance to be able to unwind in between as well. And that's another one of the issues with the workplace. So.
It is definitely, I mean, communication and learning definitely happens from people to people, and those corridor conversations, things like that we're now missing out on. That's where a lot of decisions are made. They're not necessarily just made in meetings. And I know a lot of businesses are talking about this, but you raised a really interesting point, which is about training and development. And I know prior to the pandemic, all businesses pretty much, definitely in the UK, but definitely globally as well, we're talking skills and skill shortages, and so bringing those young people along is absolutely key. And we've got an aging population at the moment, and a lot of them are going off for retirement and are reaching that retirement age, the mass population. So how do we bring those young people along? I mean, how has the pandemic affected that? Who wants to go next? I think I'll pick on Ian. What's your thoughts on that? Because I don't think I asked you the last question, did I? So we'll go round to the room.
Yeah, on that last question, that's an interesting one actually, and definitely, you know, agree with everyone's comments with regard to the convenience of just quickly dropping onto a Teams call, for example. So there's no denying that is, you know, really useful from a business efficiency point of view. But two things struck me actually on the back of what everybody was saying there. First of all is, if you are a technical or an advanced manufacturer, how do you, when you're on a call like this to a customer, how do you really showcase your expertise, and how do you really talk about the great work you're doing? Because it's much easier if you're in person to be able to do that and to sort of, you know, bring up some extra content. It's a bit harder when you're on a platform like this, really. So that's one interesting thing that certainly alerted my attention, and something we talked to, you know, quite a few of our clients about. But the second one really is more in the field of trade shows and expo events as well, you know, in terms of, obviously everything's all been virtual for the last 18 months or so, including some of those, you know, huge European shows like Hanover Messe, for example, or in the UK we've got the Mac show coming up in April, haven't we, next year, which has been postponed for 18 months or so, something like that. And so those shows have all been virtual. And I think particularly, you know, in my circles, I'm seeing some of those events coming back online into in-person events towards the end of this year. And of course, that enables you to have those greater customer conversations. But, you know, it's that transition as well, isn't it, from a virtual show platform into, you know, in-person events, and lots of adverse comments with regards to the virtual side of things, you know, in terms of how easy it is to actually have customer conversations. We were exhibiting at Hanover back in April. And for us, actually, the virtual nature was so much easier for us to deal with, because that's an enormous show. There's probably, what, 1,500 exhibitors there. It's just enormous. And actually, for us to pick and choose the people we wanted to go to and just direct message them, it was so much easier. There's no way, if it was a live event, there's no way, A, I'd have got those conversations, or B, being able to physically, you know, trawl that amount of ground to see those people. So there's pluses and benefits to both sides, really, aren't there?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so in terms of communication, bringing new people along, what are the main sort of impacts of that? How do we bring people along and train people and develop the younger generation coming through in a world that's moved more online? What's the solutions to that? So, who wants to jump up? Do you want to jump? Who wants to jump in? Did you put your hand up, Paul, or was you just?
Yes, you did.
You did.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I thought that's
one
way of getting your attention. No, I think it's an interesting thing about bringing young people on, because, you know, as you mentioned about the conversations around the water coolers, you know, when people join your business, you know, you can have those conversations. How's it going? You know, is it okay? And working from home, you know, it's very difficult to ask someone, are you okay? You know, and try and measure how they're coping with their workload. And, you know, and I think people don't just suddenly say, I can't cope anymore, but how are they coping, you know, in a home environment when they've got things to do. Whereas if you're in an office, you can quite clearly see who's busy, and you can say, well, can I help out? Or, you know, is someone else, can they get involved, and so on. It's a lot harder doing that virtually. But the point I was going to raise is that we've been trying to we have done some recruitment during the lockdown, and but we actually found it quite hard. Yeah, recruitment is harder now than perhaps it was 2 years ago. And I think that is because people are generally nervous. You know, they're kind of, you know, they're going to see how it pans out before they make that bold decision as to try and start something new, or to move on. So whilst, yeah, there's probably people who may be looking for work, and that's an unfortunate circumstance of the whole pandemic, there's other people who are maybe good candidates who in the past may have considered roles with your organization, who choose not to move. You know, they don't like the added, you know, insecurity of chancing their arm at something else. So recruitment, I think, is an issue that we have to deal with, as well as, you say, bringing on the young people, which I think is the future, but it's hard to do that at the moment. Yeah, what is the lessons to bring the best out of the emerging, junior population who in the last case, in some cases, may have not worked for the 1 or 2 years, or if worked at all. So yeah, no, it is an interesting challenge.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think something like online tools are just a tool to be used, and we have to learn how to use them. So I'm not the world's biggest fan of, I don't like email as a method of communication. I think it's a barrier to communication a lot of the time. But Microsoft has Teams and Yammer are two Microsoft tools to use. Teams, I think, is the best online platform because it's not just about doing meetings. It's actually about information sharing and communication, formal and informal. And then Yammer as well internally is like a virtual water cooler where people can put in ideas like that says, oh yeah, I saw this, why aren't we doing this? And then other people can chime in and comment. And Microsoft actually use it themselves for that very reason, because they want to harvest ideas that their employees are bringing and discussing and think, oh, can we do this? What do we think of this kind of thing? So Teams and Yammer, two very interesting packages from my view, the world's worst supplier of software.
I use Teams at the moment, and yeah, absolutely very useful for the SharePoint facilities and communication. I've not used Yammer, so I'm going to have a play with that, and that sounds very interesting. So it's a good way to capture ideas and track them, not track them through, but I guess flow them through. Is that right? Yeah.
So, but as with all data, you can do an analysis of it. If people are yammering about X, a lot of people are piling in, then it's easy for decision makers to see and say, oh, this is being talked about, or that's being talked about. And so it's a way of taking those water cooler conversations, which may go nowhere, and fundamentally taking them somewhere effectively. So it's I'm personally a big fan of software and online and avoiding traveling, because I have to do it an awful lot for my job because I'm a customer facing person. But I think, internally Yammer, and with customers, Teams. One thing that Teams is, if you're the person you're communicating with is on Teams, you don't have to email, you can have a Teams chat.
Yeah.
So it's not another email. Email has become like, oh God, it's email. It's kind of just feels, for me now, email feels outdated.
Yeah.
I'm used to WhatsApp and stuff. I don't want to send emails.
I only send an email if it's a long bit of information, quite a good chunk of information with attachments and all of that. And it's almost like a letter, isn't it? Now you're kind of in replacement of a letter, whereas if I'm going to talk to somebody, it's usually a WhatsApp, or I'll even message people on LinkedIn, just through the messenger service of LinkedIn. But I'm very reluctant to emails. But they're quite hard to find as well, when you go back.
Nightmare.
Yeah. So that's interesting. What are the learnings then? What are we learning at the moment in this current situation where we are? What are we actually learning? And what I'll do now, I don't know how you want to play it, is if you just want to sort of jump in rather than me go around the room and just, if two sort of talk at the same time, I'm sure we'll sort it out between ourselves. It's fine, but it might be just open the discussion up a bit. So what are the learning points going forward after this, global pandemic? What have we learned? How are we going to become stronger from it? Who's going to do it?
Well, I think one of the key things actually is about using technology to our advantage. We have all these different sort of comms levels. There's all these different tools, and we're working in different ways now. So let's use technology in a smarter way, and in a more productive way, and in a more interactive way to really help us do our jobs better, but also to talk about the kind of business that we do as well. So I think it's really about working a bit smarter, really, isn't it? A bit more efficiently with our time, but also being able to engage a bit deeper with our customers as well.
Yeah.
That's a good example of that. We're developing building information models and digital twins of the buildings that we're designing, and part of that is that you're able to then use that for your facilities management after, and you're able to gauge how much energy you're having to put into your buildings, and it all builds up that data environment that you can then use to analyze your business as well, make sure you're working as efficiently as possible. And that allows us to do animations and actually use a 3D model rather than just a set of plans or sections or elevations to make sure we're building as efficiently as possible, and coordinating with others. So we're not isolated architects working in one room and engineers working in another room. So it's all collaborated on the cloud, and everyone coordinates on a kind of real-time basis. So it's much more efficient in terms of the way that we're working now.
I think it's like, I see that, there's probably two revolutions happening here, and that's like the digital revolution, which I guess had started before, but not everybody had grasped it. And there's so much capability out there that most businesses are just not even scratching the surface of, that's about to kind of take off, because we're getting used to working now in this, we've been forced to work in this virtually.
Yeah, they're charging it.
Yeah. And then there's the green revolution, and I think the fact that I think a lot of people are looking at their values, and what were things like not being able to travel and whatnot. It started to sort of drive forward that green revolution as well, which seems to be two quite big positives really. So any other learnings or anything else, any other positives, things that we're going to get strong out of this, get stronger and more resilient out of this situation? Go on, Gaurav.
So what we noticed as well is, before we used to go to the machines to find out what the machine utilization was. We talked to an operator or the supervisor, and now we are looking into a software which can tell us machine utilization of 10 different machines on one screen. So you could see with graphs, and you could see that machine was utilized 60% last hour, and then you can straight away get to someone on the phone. Whereas before it was always the following day or the following week. Why was our productivity low? So you're still talking about just the communication, but there is also this other element of data that we never thought was possible, but now we are investigating into that. And certain things I still find it difficult. Whiteboard meetings, I found them refreshing, but now teams have also come up with their own version of whiteboard. So we're getting there in terms of technology, and I think the more we learn about technology and more features that get added, it will start to get so much more normal for us to all work virtually. It's still not there yet. I think I still make a trip to the office to see that important person for that important meeting, which I think if the technology was that much better, then I could avoid. But coming back to the training side, we recently turned down an apprentice because it just wouldn't work in the current climate for him to work remotely, whereas he would not have any mentors. So I think it's a double-edged sword, this situation where you would like technology, you want to embrace it, yet you want someone to be close to you so that you can mentor that person. So that's the learning from this situation.
How do we get past that? I think that's the biggest question. And it's not just, I took part in a forum in another business show, not in this industry, more about just business resilience in general. And that is the ultimate question, like how do we get through this, the communication situation where, yeah, it's fantastic, like the virtual world and the electronic world is offering us massive benefits in terms of communication, but nothing seems to replace that in-person, people being together, learning from each other, having those short conversations, bouncing things off each other. I've worked in a business. I've worked in a business, sorry, something just popped up on my screen, I couldn't see you all. I've worked in a business improvement environment, and, you know, a lot of that, like when you're looking at improvement, a lot of it is just conversations. You're sat in an office and like something springs into your head and you throw it to this person, you just start batting it between you, and then a group of people have come up with something. How do we replace that in this current situation?
There was a distinct instance which I remember where one of my colleagues was stuck on a problem, and I was in the office before the pandemic. I turned around and I'm like, that's how you fixed it. And it took me less than 5 seconds to fix his problem. Now if there is a problem now, I would not be able to help him out, or he wouldn't be able to help me out. So I would rather try and figure out the problem myself. So I think the communication is, I think being in office is equally important as being remote, but how we get past this stage, I think that's again an important question, and I would like to know other people's views on that as well.
So the way I've been pestering my employer to get Teams and Yammer, and they're just about to relent on Teams, is you have a Teams chat where, you know, if you work in a close group of people who are independent, you have a Teams chat, but then you've also got the Teams call where you can just hit the call button. It calls from your computer and you can say, I've got this problem. So I think for me, it's just getting used to the technology. If I look at my little niece who's 9, she thinks nothing of going on to iMessage and doing a FaceTime call with one of her friends. And she could be on them for hours effectively, and they communicate. I listen to them and they're communicating away. And I think the issue is for older chaps like me, I'm 47, 48, nearly 48, is how are those young people who are coming up communicating, and how do we interface with them? And how do we make the employment environment more attractive to them by using these tools? Because they're just tools. They're not magic shows or anything. They're just tools. So listening to Paul talking about engagements with customers, with online demos and things like that, it's a very powerful sales tool, because pictures are worth more than words. And so being able to show somebody something, how it works, is far more powerful. So I think, yeah, it's about understanding the tools and how to use them effectively. So if, as Gaurav, is your name, is that Gaurav said, the turnaround of the chair can be pressing the call button and saying, can you help me? I've got an issue here. I'm struggling with this. So it is, yeah, it is literally learning to use the tools. And also as my own employer, it's like employer resistance. Employers don't understand the tools. They don't understand how they work and how they can change the way staff work. And I hear a lot of being talked about hybrid working, and a lot of people are saying, yeah, you need to go in sometimes, but you don't need to be there all the time, because what benefit does it add? And I think this is, for the investors, is difficult, is what value does this add for the investor and the customer by having someone sat in a chair? So you in a head office, so you could argue, does having a very, very expensive head office in London for a company that actually makes its money dotted in facilities all over the country, if you actually did an analysis of that, you'd realize that was a huge anchor on the balance sheet. You actually don't want your people there. You want them at your facilities which exist already. So the head office is that something that's going to go, simply because you can base people out of production sites, for example. This would be a manufacturing company, because then those people can talk to each other over Zoom and then travel for the occasional meeting. It's all about, for me, it's about how this changes the structure, the cost structures in the business, and how the value it delivers for investor and customer.
Is flexible working a way forward, do you think? Is that the...
No, I think so. For me, I think looking to Paul's point, says, yeah, you can get so far with the online, but there still ultimately is that human need to go and shake someone's hand, for someone to actually look you in the eye rather than as a talking head on a screen, effectively. So yeah, I think hybrid definitely, but I think it's assessing, does that role need to travel? Can this role really be done effectively? So if all you're doing is looking at spreadsheets and analysing numbers all day, I mean, I don't know if anybody else is here. Where's the architect gone? But
he had to jump out because he had a client call, he said.
Yeah, so I've walked through offices working with building services engineers in London, where everybody's head down in their own little cubicle, and you think, why do they bother? This is a massive overhead for the company just to have a load of people come in and then shut themselves in a box. Well, they might as well stay at home if they're going to shut themselves in a box. And I think this is the weird thing is, do people actually need to collaborate? How do they collaborate? So if the more involved the design, let's say you're Airbus designing aircraft, you've probably got some people who are working in a collaborative way fairly intensively to get something done. So they're probably going to need to be in the same space. But if the collaboration is not so intense, do they need to be? Can the online tool help them be more focused on their collaboration, for example? So this is what it is. It's a tool that it's new to us, and we're going, what's this? How do we use it? How does this work? I mean, why do I want it? What's in it for me? What's in it for them? Kind of thing.
And these are the innovations. These are the future innovations, aren't they? This is what business is going to get us through in the future, isn't it? It's going to come up with
absolutely
good designs to sort of get us through these problems that we've got at the moment. Which is,
I think we probably need to have this conversation about a year's time, because we've come a long way in the last 18 months, and how we, no one's business plans foresaw a pandemic, and what would you do if you had to then work from home for the following year. No one ever considered this, or certainly not in our organisation. And I think we will learn the best way after all this. Will we come back? Will it be exactly as it was? Probably won't be. I think there'll be lots of changes in the way we do things, and it's probably sort of a halfway between kind of working from home and working in the office. But we're a manufacturing company, and we have people who have been working throughout in the office, throughout in our shop floor manufacturing things. And so there comes a time where actually sort of management leadership does have to visit the office just to show their face, because otherwise these people will think, well, it's all right for them, they're all at home, and I'm the one that's got to open up at 7 o'clock in a winter's morning and close down at the end of play. So we also have to recognize people who physically can't be at home and and have their own responsibilities, because they're ultimately the key to your business. Because if you can't manufacture, you can't get things out the door, then your business is not going to last long. So I think whatever we think, we also have to think about people who maybe not so, because of their job responsibilities, may not have the opportunity to work from home.
Excellent. Okay, I think we're about to wrap it up there. So I'll just give everybody an opportunity to have their final thought or final say, even if it's just a goodbye, whatever you want to say. But yeah, go ahead and just do your final thoughts and your final. Tom, you go first.
Thank you. So this has been a great conversation, and hitting on a lot of points, touches a lot of what I'm trying to do in trying to get over that hurdle, especially in an industry where nobody's even, it's not even anybody's job to understand that there is an issue up at the front end with printed circuit boards. It isn't taught anywhere, so there isn't a discussion about it. But yet, if we think about it, and one of the things that popped into my mind was maybe academia it would play another a role in this, to even just get the word out. Printed circuit boards haven't been looked at in 70 years in how they're made or how they're processed, and the discoveries that we have here would not only lean out your material on the the printed circuit board, but it would also lean out the back end PCBA operation significantly. So this would be, and to Paul's point, you know, we're just trying to keep the lights on and get the product out that we have orders for. And how do I jump into, or is it a discussion that has to happen at the C-suite that this is even available for somebody to take a look at and take advantage of?
That's the thing. It's getting that message across. A lot of industries, we've had things that have just not changed, and printed circuit boards is something that I've worked in the past, and in electronics, and right from the design stage to the manufacture of the bare board PCB, to the assembly of the PCB, to the putting it into the sort of system integration kind of thing. And yeah, the PCB is like, you know, so many of them around, and they're disgusting things really, aren't they? You know, what they're made of and how much material and toxic chemicals and metals and everything else that goes into them. They're just, you know, like what? Yeah, there's not a huge amount of conversation around them, is there?
Right.
One for the future.
And it's that legacy. It's handed down from you know, mentor to mentee. So if you've learned, or you know didn't have the tools to start with, you just pass down the same old thing year on year. And a lot of the people that are left are, you know, they've got the 30-40 years of experience, which everyone needs, but they're not looking for a new way at the moment.
Yeah. John, have you got a final word?
New tools, take some time. They were forced on us, but take some time to find out how they work for your business, and how they work for you. Because as Paul said, many people, and I think as Gaurav said, many people, they have to be in a physical location. You can't remote work and build something on a production line or in a production facility. And likewise, a technical guy who can be called to the factory floor repeatedly, it gets much harder for them to work from home, because they may need to pick something up and look at it. And as Gaurav said, in the virtual world, I don't think that augmented reality is there yet. It's heading that way, but it's there. So yeah, they're just tools. How do they work for you and your business?
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. Gaurav, your final word. Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry. So the couple of benefits that I have seen in the last year and a half are that we are reviewing our processes, and we were a lot more paper driven, and now we are going to the digital world, obviously. So we have everything on SharePoint. So it's worth looking into the processes and seeing what waste could be removed from all the different sectors within the business. And the other thing which might which comes as a surprise is packaging. We are also looking into greener ways of packaging our products, and we're looking at reviewing the actual cost to the environment of packaging rather than just the cost to the business. So there have been positives, and if we can sustain the process improvements, being a greener world, so to speak, and improve our communication, then I think we can come out of this as a stronger society.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I agree with that. And Paul, what's your final words?
I agree with comments raised by Gaurav, John, Tom, and others. I think we've got to learn from this. You know, it was something which no one foresaw. And we have come a long way. Yeah, we've learned a lot. And I think that some of it's been good, some of it's not been so good. Some we've kind of blundered through it. But I think now's a chance for us to take stock. I think we will come out of it better as a business. We certainly have learned a lot from this, and I think we have benefited from the problems that the pandemic has caused us. And I think we have learned a lot about how we go about our business and so on. And as long as we don't forget these things, it's easy to go through an experience like this, and 2 or 3 years down time, you're back to old habits and old routines. And as long as we take all the lessons learned, both good and bad, and then use them, I think is the best way forward. But I think we're all resilient people. We've shown how we can overcome challenges, and I continue on this wave and not go back into what we might have done in the past, and and sometimes taking the easy options, or the always gone about things and done things in the way we've always done them, because that is the easiest way. So yeah, but it's been a really good debate, and thank you for sharing, Zoe.
Thank you, and thank you to all of the guests and the panelists and the observers. It's been great, and I've enjoyed this. Thank you very much. And yeah, well, I'm sure if you want to exchange details, link to each other on LinkedIn. I think I might have shared your details anyway. I hope you don't mind, because I copied you all in on an email. So yes, and thank you very much, and goodbye.
Thanks, Zoe.
Yes, thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.